Hi, Gerald Yell here. I'd like to thank Alien Buddha Press for putting out Evolution for the hell of it. I'm going to read from it a bit. Insurmountable odds notwithstanding, we started developing the chlorophyll tat just as the last of the polar ice melted. Penguins and polar bears with nowhere to go might have made good test subjects, but protection laws kept them out of the lab. No matter, they were human volunteers. We promised them money, though we didn't have any. The promise was good enough, as were our intentions. If the tattoo worked and we turned a profit, we'd look them up and give them each a 20. They talked it over. What's the worst that could happen? We get it on the left hand. If it turns green, we still have our right. They didn't worry about hepatitis. Most of them had it already. Some were still undergoing chemo, street chemo, paid for with sex and menial labor. Hardly anyone could afford real chemo, not since universal health care was repealed. So we brought them to this factory basement in Menlo Park, all done up like a legitimate lab. We'd wiped the tables with disinfectant, put on clean white lab coats, and replaced all the light bulbs with 100 watters. Of course, we used clean needles. Needless to say, when the bodies started piling up, news media said we exploited the poor. That wasn't fair. In most cases, it was a pre existing condition that killed them, not the tattoo. What's the worst that could happen? Water retention, compulsive bathing, surliness, seasonal affect. On the other hand, if the chlorophyll tattoo worked, you could sell your stove. You'd never have to cook. Factories could remake them into tanning booths. People might need to jumpstart the chlorophyll on cloudy days, or if they traveled to a polar zone in winter. As is so often the case with these things, wars were the catalyst. Hair war, to be exact. Root hair transplants from genetically modified bromeliads, harvested and tested during the late trade wars on the assumption that they were the plant equivalent of stem cells. Would they stimulate phototropism in hair follicles when transplanted onto the human scalp? Tests by competing labs proved inconclusive, but as so often happens in these experiments, a lateral thinking research assistant saw something, a mishandled petri dish set aside for cleaning, and on it a little patch of bright green moss that on close inspection turned out to be not moss but human peach fuzz. And what was it doing turning green? Not growing penicillin, although traces of mold were later found, but a form of previously unknown glucose. Reverse male pattern baldness be damned. We were about to reshape humanity and reform the character of the planet, grafting chlorophyll into human skin. The first volunteer for the green leaf tat began screaming bloody murder 30 seconds into the job, and continued screaming even after we administered a local anesthetic. A 300-pound former linebacker, he whacked poor Lilypad in the face with a forearm, knocked her teeth clear out of her mouth and into the back of the lab, sprung off the chair, and shot out the door, screaming and cursing down the street in broken English. We never saw him again. Took us half an hour to find Lilypad's dentures. We propped her up with tranks and pain meds, brought in an amateur anesthesiologist, and some restraints for the armchair, then called for the next volunteer. This one lasted a minute and a half before the anesthetic lost effect and Lilypad lost her teeth again. We had thought we needed restraints, given the subject was out cold. Actually, we didn't think it was a good idea to have the restraints where subjects could see them. We didn't want to scare them off before we ever got started. For the third trial, we kept them under the chair until the subject was anesthetized, then strapped them down. The straps snapped soon after the anesthetic wore off, but not before Lilypad had time to duck. And so it went for quite a while. We managed to track down a few of our early test subjects, checked their tattoos, none of which were conducting any kind of photosynthesis, the chlorophyll having either leached out or dried up and crusted off. What we were after at this stage, however, was what the guys felt. Was it stabbing or wrenching, burning or flaying? How long did it last? What could they tell us about suddenly coming out of the anesthesia into shocking pain? One said it was like sticking your tongue in a light socket while grabbing a white hot light bulb. Another imagined it was like being struck by lightning. One kid, who'd been a physics major, said it was as if every electron in his body quantum leapt to a higher orbital. Well, that's the beginning of the story. Hope you like it. Thanks.